Welcome to Masculinities Group Dialogue. Today we're talking about APIDA identities, or Asian Pacific Islander Desi American identities. And we're joined today by Kenji Kurose, and he's going to be sharing a little bit about his own journey at Cal Poly and with APIDA identities and masculinity. So welcome and thank you for being here, Kenji. I just want to ask you, before we get started and jump right into the APIDA identities part, to share a little about yourself, just kind of generally about anything you want us to know about you, your interests, hobbies, and maybe how you're connected here at Cal Poly.
For sure, thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Kenji Kurose. My pronouns are he, him, and his. Just some of the things I've been involved with at Cal Poly. Formerly, I was the Vice President of External Affairs for USFC, the United Sorority and Fraternity Council. I've been a student assistant for OUDI, the Office of University Diversity and Inclusion, working with CPX, and also working on the Student Diversity Advisory Committee. And currently, I am the treasurer of the Educators of Color Club, which is a new club that just popped up on campus this year, and doing some work with Beacon as a research assistant. Yeah, but I'm really excited to be here and talk about my identities and how that relates to masculinities.
Thank you for being here, as always. We love having guests on the show. So talking more about APIDA as a term is really large, like Asian Pacific Islander Desi American. That encapsulates so many cultures, encapsulates so many ideologies, thoughts, and customs. So just talking about broadly that idea of APIDA identities, what is something that viewers should know about it? What's something that people should generally have a knowledge of when they're talking about APIDA identities?
Well, it's actually interesting. I'm taking a class called Asian American Activism right now, taught by Lillian Tang and Olivia Tran. Yeah, it's been really interesting. And we just wrote an essay about kind of the Asian American identity, right? And how that relates. And, I mean, in that sense, talking about activism, I think recognizing that Asian Americans have some privilege in a sense, like within the racial hierarchy, and understanding where we can become activists in that sense. But also, I mean, it's such a broad term, right? It's Asian American it's a pan-ethnic, right? So there's multiple cultures and identities involved. But I think for me, being an Asian American, I don't know. I just think about my culture and being Japanese American, and how do I relate with other Asian Americans, and how do we, I think what I've been focused on lately is within this Asian American activism class is kind of interacting with other Asian Americans around me to kind of push towards that activism sense, right? And push towards, social justice efforts. And I think that's something as an identity we can improve upon.
Definitely the activism aspect is a huge part of being evaluative and critical of how our own identities play into the work we do and the actions we take. So yeah, thinking about that, so you really talked about the APIDA identity part, but you also hold the masculine identity, which is, it's a whole nother level because, for me, and I've read a lot of studies where that's like the two things that people notice about you when they first meet you. They kind of notice your ethnicity, your race, as well as your gender. So think about your APIDA identities and your masculine identity. How do you think those kind of interact with each other, or how have they kind of changed how you perceive the world around you, or how the world around you perceives you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about kind of this conversation I'm about to have with Nick later, right? And talking about toxic masculinity. And I think a contributor of that is suppressing males' emotions, right? And I think that's a big theme within masculinities and something that I'm sure y'all talk about a lot. And I think as Asian Americans who are, another thing I'm taking from my Asian American activism class is the racial triangulation of Asians who are, if you think about the racial hierarchy, Asian Americans are less superior than white people, but more superior than Black people within our society. But they're also viewed as the perpetual foreigner, right? So they're excluded in that sense, right? Where Asian Americans aren't typically viewed as Americans sometimes and will be seen and held as that foreigner and not a part of America and that doesn't understand cultural norms. So that's where I think Asian American men can kind of be seen as not only like men who are supposed to suppress their emotions, but also some people who don't have that American identity, right? So almost, and in that sense, I feel like Asian American men could be seen as that outsider role, right? And be, and that's where you see a lot of stereotypes, I think, with Asian American men who are the computer science nerds, or and I'm a living stereotype. I'm a math major, but who are basically outsiders in that sense and only understand STEM or whatever like that, right? And I think that's an issue, I guess, with being an Asian American man and how people perceive me.
Yeah, I wanted to chime in, Kenji, because like you were saying right now with your masculine identity and your own other identities, like within ourselves with our identities, we try to aim to like inspire and like build the confidence and like just pride with deepen within like our own identities. And being the APIDA, how do you think in your community that we can stray away or like better that community or have these conversations?
Yeah, I think we just need to have a cultural shift, because these are something I think that a lot of my peers, that my Asian American peers, like they don't have these conversations with their parents, right? And because a lot of them are first gen, right? Or a lot of their parents immigrated here, right? So it's where they haven't had these kind of conversations with their parents and haven't been able to kind of talk through their identities and be able to express their emotions more clearly. I think it's something that I've definitely tried to work on within my fraternity and my Asian interest fraternity, and focus on having these DEI dialogues. And we had a really great conversation about mental health a few weeks ago, and I think that definitely, like, I was able to learn a lot about my brothers and the guys around me, and I think in that conversation, I think we can push forwards, and I think a lot of them were inspired by that too, right? To have these conversations and talk to their peers about it, because I mean, mental health needs to be prioritized too, and within masculinities and especially men of color.
Yeah, thank you. I know just because just having this dialogue, also holding the identity, like masculine identity, and having this journey of like being able to open up like that, and just like talking like AP to like in general right now, there is similarities between each like identities and like each ethnicity and stuff like that. But right now, talking about this one, that's important. And it's good that there's like similarities in between everything, but that we have our own like interests and own things that we have to work through. But thank you for sharing that, because that is powerful, and just having these dialogues is a great thing to do, and be open and be vulnerable.
You mentioned the aspect of like being in a fraternity, and that builds a little bit more community, and being able to express yourself when a group of your peers is especially helpful, especially when you're experiencing similar situations or emotions or just general life interactions. And I was talking actually to a Cal Poly alumni, Winston Chang, and we were talking about there's that family aspect of influence that kind of directs your path in life. He mentioned that it kind of changes, your options in terms of what you pursue in college, especially for APIDA families. They try to push you towards more prestigious or academically challenging majors, like you were talking about, like math majors, STEM in general. You kind of brought up something interesting. You mentioned that there's a little bit of a disconnect between families, what you're willing to share with like family members, and how you interact with your social peers. Can you expand upon that a little bit, like that family aspect?
I think I have a pretty unique experience in many ways within my family. I'm biracial, so I'm Japanese Mexican, and I'm also fourth gen. So yeah, and both my parents are teachers and have been in the education field, and I've been very blessed and privileged in that way, where they've been able to really teach me like, raise me like an educated child in a sense. And I mean, that's what I want to do. I want to teach in that sense too. But I also like, I think they've definitely pushed me to always look to learn and to learn new ideas and push them to learn new ideas as well. So I think, especially lately, my parents and I have been talking a lot about my identity and how I was raised, and being able to be vulnerable in that sense. And that's where I think I've been very lucky in that sense, to be able to have that relationship with my parents and talk to them about that. But I know also other members in my family, like I'm looking at my cousins who they have not had that conversation with their parents, and I think it is kind of a cultural norm, because I know my dad did not necessarily have those conversations with his family, right, with his parents, and have those conversations about being a man, and what that means, and being able to express himself with his emotions. And I know that's something that I think has definitely played an impact on our relationship, So, but looking at my peers and how they've had like in their connection with their parents, I know I was recently talking to a friend who definitely was struggling with his mental health, and he was struggling with having a conversation with his parents about it, right? And I think their understanding of mental health and what that means was not coming through to them, right? And or like they weren't able to provide with the resources that I think were good for him, or what he needed. So I think it's just something that we need to recognize as young Asian American men, and like change the culture, right? And being able to talk more about that with our future children, right? And with our cousins, with our brothers and sisters.
I love that you mentioned resources, because you said your friend didn't have the resources in the familial way to deal with those the mental health issues that he was going through. And think about you're at Cal Poly right now. You're in it now. You're not just a first time freshman, so you have experience, you have knowledge. I was wondering if you could share maybe some of those resources through Cal Poly that can assist with those problems if you have them with mental health, whether it's finding your community, whether it's feelings of isolation. What has helped you kind of build your own sense of community at Cal Poly, holding your identities?
Yeah, I think for me, honestly, being an ethics studies minor has been something for me that's very healing. Given that I'm a math major, so when I'm in my math major courses, I'm not really having these discussions, right? But so when I go to ethics studies, it's kind of like it's a breath of fresh air, right? Like I get to be around other people of color and being able to have these more like general conversations. But obviously, being in an Asian interest fraternity has been very beneficial to me, and being able to have those people I can relate to in that sense, being within USFC, going to events held by the Multicultural Center, and other, the CLA teach-in, social justice teach-in, right? A lot of those kind of things I think are really healing for me. And then I mean, that's something me as someone who's always looking to learn and educate myself is something that I think that's kind of my way of like relaxing and unlearning. But I'm sure, I think something that, I'm gonna plug you guys, is that the Men Masculinities, or I think it's the Men of Color what advisory program, or mentorship program, right? I know that y'all are coming out with, and I think that was something that I was gonna interested in applying in as a mentor, because I think that's something that could definitely be really beneficial and I wish that was something that was around when I was a first year, right? So I can talk to someone who I could look up to. But yeah, I mean, I think I honestly have not checked out a lot of the counseling services at Cal Poly, but I would really be interested in looking and seeing what is available. But yeah, I mean, for me, those things that I mentioned are what's healing for me, for sure.
Kenji, first thank you for, gosh, I'm just really grateful that you jumped in on the call and for this event, and thanks for your transparency and fielding questions. And so I really appreciate, yeah, I think the times where we've been able to connect, I've just really appreciated your perspective. And one of the things you mentioned about like community, supporting, like men supporting men in like issues of mental health, it just made me think about how like we as men create our communities and like our networks. And I don't think this is like a blanket statement across the board, but I think something we can be unaware of is like when we're creating our communities, our networks of friends, like the places we hang out, sometimes that can be more focused on like supporting our conscious or unconscious, like vying for legitimacy, if that makes sense. Like, hey, I'm a part of this club or this organization or, you know, this committee, as a way to like bolster my resume, as a way of saying like, I'm legit, versus like structuring a community around like, gosh, like this, you know, I'm in a world that presents barriers, difficulties, hardships, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And my community and my network is framed around supporting me through that, and allowing me to support others. So it just made me think about that, like that lens. I mean, just as encouragement for myself too. I'm like, wow, that kind of, how do I use that filter of analyzing the community that I'm a part of? Like, is it built in a way that's falling into some of those unhealthy pitfalls that we as men can fall into, or is it built on cultivating healthy and inclusive models of masculinity? So I don't know if that sparks any thoughts, but just a little aside there.
No, that's great. Thank you, Nick. No, I mean, I've been reflecting a lot as a fourth year and as a graduating senior at Cal Poly, and kind of the things I've been a part of. And really, I remember after my first year, I was like, I didn't get involved in anything after my first year, but my second year, I was like, you know, I need to do something on campus, you know. I need to meet some new people, and especially some more people of color. So I was like, that's where what I was really looking for out of the club and stuff, was that sense of belonging, right? And I think that's a lot of other people of color on campus are looking for too, right? And I think that provides a lot of things, right, within USFC or any cultural clubs like PCE, JSA, MECHA, right? But yeah, and I think what I'm grateful for at Cal Poly is that a lot of those resources are available, right? And that I can find them, and even though it's a smaller community, I can get really close to that community. So yeah.
That's about all we have time for today, but I do want to say thank you so much again, Kenji. Before we end today's episode, I just want to circle back to the club you mentioned and ask you for a little bit more information on that.
Yes, so I'm part of the Educators of Color Club, and we are a new club just starting this year, which is obviously very difficult. So reaching out and being able to reach out to new members has been a little bit of a struggle, but hopefully if you're interested in education in any sort of way, teaching at the high school level, elementary school level, or even collegiate level, or if you're interested in, we have counselors that are involved, or future administrators who are in our club, and we're in open space, so we're interested in anyone coming in, and we have a lot of presenters that come in. We do a lot of dialogues, and it's been a really great community and also just share resources, right, with each other about credential programs or how to apply the credential programs and all that. It's been great, and I think I made a really good community in that. So if you're interested, check us out. I think I'll send them the Instagram page so we can plug that in the YouTube description or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll leave that link down below in the description so you can check it out. It sounds great. And I know it's going to be great because Kenji's running it. So, you know, absolutely recommend it. So you can also find information for the Men Masculinities Program in the links below. We'll have our Facebook, Instagram, website as always. And I just want to say thank you for watching and stay safe.